Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and day 2 of our bra sew along. Today I would like to start getting on that machine. We're going to construct the bottom and cradle of the bra, then we're going to move into the cups and then attach the cups to that cradle. And by the end of today, we should have something that's starting to resemble a bra. We'll basically have all of our fabric pieces sewn together. So let's get started. Setting up your machine, you're going to want to use a polyester thread. It's just a little bit more stable and robust, especially on seams where you're going to be having some tension against it. You can use cotton, but be aware that the cotton threads might snap a little bit easier. So I always stick with polyester. And most bras are made out of non-natural material anyway. There's lycra and spandex and polyester in there, so you're really not going to get away from that. And in terms of needles, bra making fabrics can be quite finicky, so you might have to test. I'm going to show it with a Microtex needle, which is a very, very thin needle, which seems to work the best, but sometimes my fabrics will start skipping stitches, and if that's the case, I might switch over to a universal needle or a ballpoint needle. You just kind of have to like try around and figure out what's best for the fabric that you're using. Since bra fabrics are so slippery, I would recommend using a walking foot if your machine doesn't have a dual feed. My Bernina 350 does not have a dual feed, so I will be using a walking foot for almost the entire portion of the bra, and that just helps all of those slippery fabrics stay in place where they need to be. I always like to start out by doing my band first and then my cups, but it doesn't really matter. You can do any way around. So I'm going to take my bridge or gore and have it right side up, and then I'm going to put my stable fabric on top of that. We're going to sew this at a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance up here. So for this, you're going to sew with a straight stitch. I don't generally worry about back tacking on this just because I know there's going to be seams crossing it and keeping it in place. Then I'm going to understitch just to make sure that stays on the inside. And here is the finished bridge. So next you're going to attach the side of the cradles to the bridge. And then you're going to want to put your fashion fabrics right side together. Your linings right side together. Just pin that in place. Again, we're going to sew this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance with a straight stitch. You can see that the outside is clean as well as the inside. So you don't really iron a lot in bra making just because there's a lot of nylon content to the bra. You don't want to melt it. So instead we top stitch, and that just keeps all the seams nice and flat. So we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from both of those seams just to keep everything flat and in place. The last step in constructing the band is to put the wings on. So just like we did for this seam, we're going to take the fashion fabrics, the right side together on the outside, and then make sure that you have your little scoop portion of that back wing facing up. Otherwise you're gonna have to unpick it and redo it. Ask me how I know. And then we just flip it around to the inside. And we put our Powernet on. And we're going to sew this again with just a straight stitch at a 1/4 inch away. Then flip them out and top stitch just like we did the center seams. And now we have our band completed. You can see everything looks nice and top stitched from the front, and then on the back All of our seams are hidden away as well. So you will notice that you can see this top stitching thread. You can play the game where you switch out your threads to make sure it matches every single fabric, but it just drives me crazy. So I try to tend to match my thread to the fashion fabric and then not worry about if the inside doesn't match completely. So now that the band is completed, we can set this aside and get started on the cups. So the first thing I'm going to do on the cups is to stabilize this lace edge. You can do it a little bit later in the process, but I always forget, so I'd like to try to do it first and then I know it's done. So you want to try to find the wrong side of the lace, which it looks like this one is the wrong side. And you're going to take your skinny elastic and just sew a zigzag stitch right along the top, sort of like along this elastic. And all that does is it helps stabilize this edge and make it so it doesn't like wear out too fast. So next we're going to start attaching the lace to the cup. So I have this lace and here it is stabilized, and I did change out the thread for this just because the gray looked super obvious. So you're going to want to put your lace right sides together with the fashion fabric. I like to pin at this corner and then this corner up here, and then just trying to like get it into place on the curve. Once that's pinned in place, I will take my lining and I will sandwich it in between the lace in between the two, and I will repin it with the lining on top. So you have lining and then lace and then fashion fabric on the bottom. So now we're just going to sew along this pinned edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance using a straight stitch again. So now if we flip this out, you can see we have our lace upper cup and the lower cup. And on the inside, all of the seams are completely hidden inside of the lining. So now we're just gonna top stitch again, just like we did in the band, and we're gonna top stitch on the fashion fabric. And this is what we get. Okay, so now that we have the upper and lower cup, we can attach the power bar on the side. So it's the same sort of methodology we've been doing. We're going to put the power bar right sides together to the outside, pin that, and then do the lining, sandwich it in between the lining on the inside, pin that, sew it, and top stitch. Okay, so here's what it looks like stitched down. And then we're just gonna flip this to the outside and top stitch again. This one I've already top stitched. You can see how the lining on the inside, it just is really nice to me because everything is, all of those raw edges are tucked away and hidden, and so I just like how clean it makes the inside of the bra to look when you line it like this. So now it's time to attach our cups to the band that we made earlier. It's a little bit difficult to sew along this curve, so I like to use a ton of pins. So we're just going to pin it in here, pin this cup in, and pin this cup in. I like to start from this top edge and pin outwards, just because if I If I've messed up a little bit, I can always trim it down over here, but I want to make sure that the center of the bra looks exactly the way it should. So we're just going to sew these into place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so all of the fabric portion of the bra is done. You can take a step back and congratulate yourselves. This is kind of my favorite time because it's when you really start to see everything take shape and how everything looks together, and I get really excited about it. You can see on the inside with the way that we have lined it, all of the cups are nice and cleaned and finished. This is exposed right now, but this is going to get hidden later on when we put in the underwire channeling, so I'm not really worried about that. This concludes day 2 of our bra making tutorial. Come back tomorrow when we put in the elastics and underwire channeling.